The AOR Season 5 GT3 Elite League on the PC platform once again proved to be top of the class in terms of online competitive racing. With a 12-round calendar and 26 very highly competitive Project Cars players, the first race was at Catalunya, where Kaki took pole and led the field away underneath the rolling start as they headed down towards turn 1. The first couple of turns of the season proved to be very clean as all the drivers made it safely through the first 3 turns without making any kind of contact. A couple of drivers running out a little bit wide in a couple of places and some having to defend their position, like Kanuma here trying to hold on from Perry Gronstra in the Z4 behind his Aston Martin. With no F1 Massa this time round to defend his season title, it was open for anyone to try and take advantage in these early stages and try and pick out the points. As ever, the drivers are very close with some fierce action in the midfield as a number of drivers chopping and changing positions as the Z4 is running out wide there in the exit of turn 5, allowing a driver or two to slip through. Ramibu there trying to go around the outside of the M3 of Maisie and slotting himself up into 10th place, trying to make some early positions in these early stages. About 8 laps into the race we saw our first real scare for one of the drivers as Tony Art was going up the inside of Freda here, coming into turns 1 and 2 until he dropped and had a slight half spin but managed to rejoin on the track. Tony Art unfortunately had a spin later on in the lap, ended up dropping himself down into 24th, rejoining without making any contact with the wall. A number of the drivers halfway through the race were making their pit stops and Brownski went in to take the lead momentarily as Govankini made a little bit of contact with the back of Papand coming into the closing stages of this race. The battle was very fierce between the two and as you can see getting very close as they come down towards the final turn, but it wasn't until about 30 seconds later in the following lap when Papand made this slight mistake running a little bit deep into turn 4 which allowed Govankini to slot up into 3rd place and take the final podium spot. In the mid-pack though, it was a very fierce battle between Andrex, Jellyfish and Tipple for 8th position, so they were coming into the closing stages on this final lap, and with extremely worn tyres they were trying to tread carefully around each other in order to avoid making contact. In the end though, Tipple managed to pip Jellyfish for 9th place, Kaki came away with the win for round 1 and Kanuma and Govankini finished off the podium. Round 2 was then at Sakito, with Perry Gronstra taking pole position, leading them away down towards turn 1 with Govankini and Kanuma in pretty hot pursuit. This time round though, turn 1 wasn't quite as clean as the previous round as there's a little bit of contact between a couple of drivers as Freda comes up into 5th place, but that was only momentarily as Kaki came around his outside to take that position away from them, dropping Freda down into 6th. Kanuma had a slight moment as he spun off onto the grass, dropping down 3 positions, rejoining just before the spoon curves in 6th position. He then later lost a couple more positions and was trying to fight his way back through the field with Ramibu trying to take away 9th position into turn 1, but wasn't quite able to make the move stick as Ramibu got the good drive coming out the exit of turn 2. The battle at the front of the field was very fierce. Govankini was very eager to try and find his way past Perry Gronstra as he tried to find a little bit of room through 130 yard but wasn't quite able to find it there. Then as the two cars came towards the final turn there was massive contact between the two drivers, putting Perry Gronstra in the wall. Govankini spinning off to the right, Papand was trying to make the move around the outside but ran out of room and out onto the gravel, but it was Kaki to benefit massively out of all that and slotting himself up into 1st ahead of a recovering Perry Gronstra, who then later pitted for repairs. The battle for 9th between Ramibu and Kanuma continued to rage on with Mini Black sitting very close behind. Kanuma seemed to have a good run coming into Spoon Curve but Ramibu managed to hang it around the outside and hold on to 9th place as Centro and his Mercedes AMG was getting well out of the way on the exit. After the earlier incident, Govankini was still pressing on in 4th, but there was a little bit of drama behind him as Brownski spun trying to avoid Perry Gronstra trying to dive into the pits, who also managed to collect Ramibu in the process as well, but both Ramibu and Gronstra were both able to make the pit line whereas Brownski had to continue on. On lap 14 today managed to make the move in his Z4 up the inside of Freda into turn 1 and slot himself up into 3rd position, just as Kanuma in his Aston Martin was starting to close up behind. But then, incredibly, there was even more drama for Govankini as he tried to take too much speed coming into the pit entry, hitting the tyre barrier on the entrance and losing a wheel. He was, however, able to drive the car back into the pits and get it repaired. After the reshuffling during the pit stop phases, Freda was back up in 2nd as Kanuma just about managed to sneak through on the inside through 130 yard to take 2nd place away from him, but Freda didn't want to give up the place too easily and tried to fight back through the final turn, tucking up underneath Kanuma, trying to perform a little bit of a switchback as they come through the final corner side by side as they come to start the last 6 laps. However, the power of the Aston Martin was able to hold out compared to the Z4 and hold on to the position. Next up on Freddo was Today, as he was trying to claw back the time that he had lost in the pit stop phases, and as he made the move down the inside to try and take that final podium position, he ran a little bit deep under braking and made contact with Freddo, pushing him out wide, giving Freddo a cut track penalty and Andrex the opportunity to slip through up into third position, as Today held his ground, being a gentleman driver. The drama of the second round though was not over, as Papan was running out of fuel on the final lap, having to coast the last couple of corners as Kanuma was closing up behind him in the Aston Martin, took that lead away from him coming into the final turn. Papan, running on fumes, was absolutely powerless in order to stop him, and as he was clonking out, starting to approach the line, Andrex came around the outside to take second position away. Papand just coming to a crawl down towards the start-finish line, just about managing to hold on to third place from Today as he was closing up almost a photo finish between the two. But with Kaki making a number of mistakes off camera, Kanuma came away with the win, Andrex in second and Papan third. Round 3 saw the league racing at the Azure circuit as Kaki led the field down towards turn 1, where everybody kept a calm head and managed to filter through without making any contact with any other drivers. A couple of laps into the race, Today had a slight moment coming into the chicane in 4th position, getting himself a cut track penalty and losing a couple of places, slotted down into 6th place. But then there was huge drama on the following lap between Andrex and his teammate Ramibu, who ended up putting each other in the wall in the Grand Hotel hairpin, having a little bit of contact with a couple of other drivers, and Ramibu ended up getting disqualified, having been bumped from behind whilst in reverse gear. The third Revolution Motorsport driver of Puff Pirate was then next to get involved in the action, making a little bit of contact with Dinders, pushing him into a spin and facing the wrong direction as they were both approaching Mirrorbass. Jellyfish was then applying the pressure to Hideaki as they were coming into the swimming pool complex, Hideaki making contact with the wall twice, allowing Jellyfish to slide up the inside, coming up into the next chicane as Hideaki had to take to the runoff area on the inside, gaining himself a cut track penalty. Kanuma having a slight moment coming down into the Nouvelle chicane, with Today sat right behind him applying the pressure. Today almost getting a good run coming out towards the back, but wasn't quite able to find a way past. E-Class was having a little bit of a moment there coming into the pit lane, but managed to make it into his pit box and get the damage repaired. With 11 laps remaining, the battles continued to rage on as Maisie was trying to take 5th away from Brownski, making a little bit of contact there between the two as they were coming through to back. Brownski trying to perform a nose stopper on this race and was on very heavily worn tyres. A couple of corners later, Puff Pirate was right up underneath the rear wing of Brownski and getting a good run coming out of the final turn down the start-finish straight as they were side by side on the run down towards turn 1. Puff Pirate wanting to take that 5th position, wanting to make the move down the inside in the braking zone as they came into the first turn. They both made contact with each other and Brownski was forced to take the escape road and unfortunately didn't continue and retired from the race. The next major moment happened in the Nouvelle chicane as Hideaki ran a little bit deep, made contact with the wall and then bumped into Jellyfish, forcing him to take to the escape road as he tried to avoid the barrier. Hideaki though doing the right thing and slowing and waiting down for Jellyfish to rejoin the track. Jellyfish though wasn't shy from being racy as he made a fantastic move around the outside of Rhaegar, coming into Massenet, slotting himself up into 7th place, but even then that was relatively short-lived as a couple of laps later Andrex was closing up on the back of Jellyfish as he was struggling for tyre grip, coming down towards the back. Andrex had the inside line and Jellyfish turned into him, causing contact between the two and Jellyfish to meet the wall, but it was Kaki to come away with the win, Perry Gronstra getting disqualified from the race for track limits abuse, giving Papan second and Kanuma third. Bono was to play host of the 4th round, and once again it was Kaki to take pole and lead the field down towards turn 1. Kanuma managed to get a brilliant start in 4th place and immediately pop himself up into 3rd, trying to go around the outside of Mini Black through the first turn. A number of drivers going 2, maybe 3 wide through this first corner as the field spreads out and produces an absolutely awesome spectacle as they come through turn 2 and head down the short straight down towards turn 3. As all the drivers were jostling for position, it was hard to keep track as to who was where and who was gaining ground, but of course there was one man who was pulling away from the rest of the field, Kaki trying to extend his lead at this early stage in the race as Kanuma was trying to find a way past Mini Black and slot himself up into second. Revolution Motorsport had other ideas though, as Puff Pirate managed to slip himself up into second place, shortly followed by Ramibu, who slotted himself up the inside of Kanuma to take third and chase after his teammate. Further down the field though, Andrex was trying to hold on to 16th place as the Z4 was sending a move up the inside. Andrex tucking back underneath, performing a very nice switchback and trying to retake the position, getting up the inside and momentarily retaking 16th place before being on the outside of the next corner, and a little bit of contact between the two drivers pushing Andrex out wide, causing him to lose a number of positions and dropping back down into 20th position. Coming up to the halfway mark in the race, Today was trying to chase after his teammates after having a poor qualifying. Having worked his way through the field and up into 11th place, Nozja retook the position coming into the first turn, demoting Today down into 12th. Jellyfish also wanted to capitalise on the battle, slotting himself up the inside as well, taking 2 places and pushing Today back down into 13th. 6 laps later, and Today was trying to run an alternative strategy to the drivers around him, trying to go for as long as possible on the set of tyres that he had and see if he can try and do a no-stopper. Going 3 wide through turn 2, a little bit of contact was made between the 3 drivers of Wycombe's Today and Perry Gronstra. Unfortunately though, Today wasn't able to hold on to the tyres and was forced to make a pit stop, and he would finish the race in 16th position. Just 2 laps from the end of the race, Mini Black had a moment and spun off to the left-hand side of the circuit, dropping from 4th position down into 5th, managing to avoid the wall though, and managed to recover back onto the circuit and come home in that 5th position. Final lap, last 2 turns, Ramy Boo was having to go defensive to Kanuma. Kanuma trying to go around the outside of that second to last corner, but Ramy Boo held his line beautifully and was able to hold off the Aston Martin to the start finish line to come home in the final podium position, taking 3rd, with Puff Pirate, his teammate, taking 2nd and Khaki coming away with the win. Round 5 was the next race, and it was very wet and tricky at Road America in the heavy rain. Khaki once again taking pole in qualifying, Tony Art this time getting a decent qualifying as well, immediately jumping himself up into 3rd place just ahead of E-Classens and threatening Perry Gronstra on the run down towards turn 1. The conditions immediately played their part as Perry Gronstra ran a little bit deep through the first turn, running out wide, allowing Tony Art to slip up into 2nd place and Gronstra's teammate E-Classens up into 3rd. On the first run down the back straight, a number of drivers were going 3 wide, a little bit of bumping there between Fredder and Mini Black, and just as Today was about to slip past as well, he got pushed onto the grass, rejoining, getting hit by Centro and shoving him off into the wall, dropping him down a number of positions all the way down into 24th place as they come into the very slow and tight left-hander. Having started down in 6th position, Kanuma was making good use of the power of his Aston Martin to slot himself up into 3rd place ahead of E-Classens. E-Classens getting a pretty good drive coming out the final turn, but the power of the Z4 was no match compared to the might of the Aston Martin that was now in front of him. A lap later though, E-Classens was looking pretty threatening as he locked the brakes slightly, tapping the rear of Kanuma and shoving him out wide, allowing Perry Gronstra to slip through and take 3rd place away from both of them. A couple of corners later, after Kanuma had rejoined behind E-Classens, E-Classens ran a little bit wide through the right-handed kink and lost an awful lot of time, getting a slowdown penalty, losing a number of positions to the drivers around him, dropping back down into 7th place. Just over the halfway mark in the race, Tony R made his pit stop for a fresh set of wet tyres from 2nd position, dropping himself all the way down into 18th place, where he rejoined the circuit and had to try and work his way back through the pack. This unfortunately turned out for him to be a very poor strategy choice, as none of the other drivers pitted for tyres, forcing Tony to have to fight and work his way back through the field. Tony was pushing hard though and was trying to make his way up through the order as quickly as possible and getting very close to Blue Rat as he runs out a little bit wide coming through the next turn, the two of them making a little bit of contact, pushing both of them out wide. Tony Art losing out big time on that, dropping down a number of positions down into 19th. In the remaining 5 laps, Puff Pirate was battling away with Tipple for 10th position, looking to be the faster of the 2 drivers, trying to make a move around the outside into the next right-hander, coming up on the curb upon the exit, which cost him a little bit of traction and therefore didn't quite manage to pull the move off that time. However, coming through the fast right-hander, Tipple had a little bit of a poor exit and Puff Pirate got a much better run, getting onto the grass a little bit, once again going for that outside move into the right-hander, down into 2nd gear, but this time able to make the move stick and climb up into that 10th place. On the final lap though, and a little bit further up the field, Rhaegar was closing up on the back of Dinders when he had a moment coming out the slow left-hander, clipping with the wall on the inside and then rebounding across the other side of the circuit. That dropped him down into 9th position as Ramy Boo slotted himself up into 8th, But once again, it was Kaki to come away with the win, with E. Claessens taking second and then his teammate Perry Gronscher taking third. Round 6 saw the action at the Dubai International Autodrome, and it was Perry Gronscher who led the field away down towards turn 1, with Kanuma getting a decent start, immediately slotting himself up from third up into second. With Kaki on the back foot, E. Claessens wanted to follow suit and try to make a move down the inside into turn 1. However, Kaki managed to get on the brakes a little bit later and hold on to that third position as the rest of the field followed through behind them. A couple of laps in with the field still bunched up, Andrex was trying to go around the outside of one of the Bentleys coming into turn 3. He was able to hold the move and have the inside line full of following turn 4 and was able to neatly slot himself up into 14th place and hold on to that on the back straight. On the following lap, a number of drivers were trying to pressure Martin van der Bent in the blue Aston Martin, with Nosdra in the Bentley behind, picking up a decent slipstream but wasn't quite able to get close enough to make the move. Instead, behind, Brownski lost the rear end of the car and came very, very close to making contact with the front of Martin van der Bent's Aston Martin, but both of them managed to avoid making contact. E. Claessens was eager to slip up into third and tried to send one down the inside of Kaki, making contact with the side of him. He did give the position back though and rejoined back in fourth. There was also an intense battle developing for position 6, with Rhaegar currently holding it as Tony R was trying to make a move down the inside coming into the hairpin. Both of them looked to be giving each other plenty of room before there was a tiny little bit of contact, allowing AJ, who was having a better race than previous rounds, to capitalise on the little incident between the two drivers and slot himself up into 6th position, with Rhaegar losing out on 2 places. That wasn't the end of it though, as there was a tiny little bit of contact as Tony R was trying to go around the outside, which forced him out wide, and Rhaegar slotted back up into 7th. A little bit further down the field, Tipper was trying to make his way back up past Wycombs, and coming into the hairpin at the end of the straight, he braked very, very late, coming up the inside of Maisie as well, who just about managed to see it coming and give Tipple enough room, Tipple gaining 1 place, but almost making it 2 in one corner. Then there was drama at the front of the field as Kanuma spun coming through turn 1 and into turn 2, hitting the barrier on the inside. He rejoined the track back in 5th position, losing 2 places out of that and possibly a little bit of damage to the front of his Aston Martin. Fortunately for him, that incident came a lap before he decided to pit, just behind the guys in front of him, Hideaki and AJ, as a number of drivers were coming in for their stop. Kanuma was trying to work his way back through the field, and with 12 laps remaining was able to slide past Tony R down the inside into turn 1 to take 5th position. 2 laps later, and Freda made a slight mistake coming onto the back straight, getting a slowdown penalty. That allowed Kanuma to slot up into 4th position before they made a little bit of contact with each other, coming into the hairpin, allowing the drivers behind to bunch up and get in real close and then join in with the action as well. Kanuma just about managing to hold on to 4th place for the moment as Freda continued to battle away in 5th, with Tony R behind along with Hideaki and AJ. On the next lap, Tony R was able to pick up the slipstream coming down that back straight and made a move around the outside into the braking zone of the hairpin to slot himself up into 5th place ahead of Freda. The train of 4 cars stayed pretty close together as AJ was up in 7th before there was a little bump from behind by Hideaki, which pushed AJ into a spin. Hideaki pulled over to the side of the track and waited for AJ to rejoin and allow him to slot back into 7th position. Back further down the field, the 2 Bentleys were having fun of their own as they were chasing after Brownski, both of them creating a Bentley sandwich with the Z4 in the middle, slotting past and up into 17th and 18th position. In the end, it was Perry Gronscher who took the win from Kaki and then Rhaegar up in 3rd. Round 7 was at the infamous Nürburgring Nordschleife, where Perry Gronscher once again took pole for the 2nd race in a row, just ahead of Kaki's teammate Dinder S. He led them through Flugplatz to start the race, as there was a little bit of drama behind and a little bit of a gap formed, as Freda had a slight issue and had to pull over to the side of the road to stay clear of a charging field behind him. It wasn't long until the track claimed its first victim. Tipper was there a little bit slow and lost a bunch of positions, losing an awful lot of momentum, but it was when they came up into the next few corners that they found Ramibu parked to the right hand side of the circuit in the wall. He obviously had a slight bit of drama somewhere along the line and had to wait until the entire field passed before rejoining the circuit with quite a lot of damage to the front of his Z4. Kanuma had also struggled with the start. He originally began the race in 3rd place, but in less than half a lap of racing conditions he had dropped down into 15th position. Just as he was looking racy, he had a slight moment, locking the rear of the car and spinning into the wall on the right hand side of the circuit. He was able to recover fairly quickly with what seemed to be fairly low damage and got himself back into 19th position. As the long lap went on, the field started to spread out a little bit. and Mini Black sees this opportunity to slip past Klawitsi down the inside into a corner that you would never consider to overtake on. It's very good driving by both drivers to avoid making contact, but Klawitsi had an issue later on in the mini carousel where he lost the rear end of the car and tapped the wall on the inside. This meant he lost a bunch of positions waiting for the field to pass before rejoining onto the circuit with minimal damage to the front of his car. At the front of the field it was Perry Gronstra leading Dinders and Kaki in second and third. 5 laps in and Blue Rat was having to go defensive to Kanuma as he was trying to move himself up into 14th place. Blue Rat though held his line rather well and was able to defend from Kanuma as he ran wide coming through the mini carousel, which put him in behind the Bentley that was chasing after the pair. Coming through the next turn though that led on to the big long back straight, Wycombs in the Bentley ran a little bit wide out onto the grass, which gave him a slowdown penalty, making contact with the wall. This of course then released Kanuma back in front into 15th place to once again chase down after Blue Rat. With the power of the Aston Martin V12 along with slipstream and also a very long straight, Kanuma was able to slingshot himself up past Blue Rat into 14th place. With just 2 laps to go back at the front of the field, Kaki was chasing after his teammate Dinders, who had a slight moment coming through Fugpats, running out a little bit wide and then switching to the other side of the circuit onto the grass. This allowed Kaki to slip through, but he was unable to chase after Perry Gronstra up ahead. Back a little bit further down the field, Mini Black was looking pretty threatening, trying to find a way past Jellyfish, getting a decent exit coming out of one of the right-handed hairpins. However, he didn't quite have the power over the McLaren, who managed to hold on to his position. Jellyfish though, on the back straight, was able to pick up an almighty slipstream and was able to slingshot himself past Andrex for 6th position. Mini Black was still chasing though, and even though he had the double slipstream of the 2 cars in front, he wasn't quite able to get up close enough alongside Andrex to make a move coming into the braking zone of the last few turns. In the end, it was Perry Gronstra in the Z4 who had a pretty much flawless drive and was able to come away with the win, conquering the green hell. The man he was chasing for the championship though, in second position was Kaki, who had a spin coming out the final turn right before the line, which allowed his teammate Dinders to come up and just about pip him to the line for second position. Kaki came away with the final podium spot in third. Round 8 took the lead to Donington National, where Kaki took the pole position for the race and led the drivers down towards turn 1 with Perry Gronstra holding on to second. As you can see though, the visibility is very heavily reduced with an awful lot of thick fog in and around the circuit. A couple of drivers having a little bit of trouble coming through the first turn. Freddo losing a lot of positions coming out of the first turn as it appeared that he got hit with a cut track penalty. Coming through turn 4 there was more drama as Wycombs lost the rear end of the car, making contact with Martin van der Bent, then multiple other drivers getting hit and spinning off to the side of the circuit. AJ was unfortunately one of those who ended up involved in the incident and ended up retiring from the race. Wycombs, however, was able to rejoin, get the damage repaired and continue on. Freddo, who unfortunately had lost a bunch of positions on the first turn, was starting to carve his way back through the field, making this move around the outside of the McLaren, slotting himself up into 11th place. At the front of the field, the battle between Perry Gronstra and Kaki raged on. Perry Gronstra, looking the faster out of the 2 drivers, was eager to try and find his way past, but Kaki was able to hold his line and defend well, and was therefore able to manage to hold on to his lead to come away with the win, Perry Gronstra in second and Papand in third. Round 9 was at a very sunny Bathurst where Kaki took pole position and led the field away. His teammate Dinders was in second place, followed by Wycombs, Tony R, Perry Gronstra, Sula and also Jellyfish. As this was quite a high altitude track, this was certainly favouring the turbo cars as they were looking to dominate the results board for this round. Freddo once again found himself in the wars, this time with the circuit, as he had to rejoin back in 26th position after a spin and some contact, suffering quite heavy damage to the front of his Z4. A new debutant for this round was Sula in the Bentley, as he was trying to make his mark by sending a move up the inside of Perry Gronstra coming up into turn 2, however he didn't quite manage to make it stick as Perry Gronstra managed to hang it around the outside. On that same lap though, Sula managed to find his opportunity coming down the Conrod straight as he picked up the slipstream of Perry Gronstra in front of him, slingshotting past up into 5th position, with Jellyfish also wanted to slip past on the grass at 180 miles per hour, making a little bit of contact with Perry Gronstra, which put him onto the grass and also allowed Kanuma to slip through up into 7th place, dropping Perry Gronstra down into 8th. Behind them was Papand. He wanted to try and slide his way past as well, but Gronstra once again managed to hang it around the outside before there was contact between Kanuma and Jellyfish in turn 2, costing them both places, suffering a little bit of damage and allowing Papand and Gronstra to slip through up into 6th and 7th position. A little bit further back, the second debutant of Gibbs was trying to defend from Nosdra in the Bentley behind before there was a little bit of contact between those two, having to cut across the chicane and rejoin, picking up a cut track penalty, dropping down a couple of places as the Z4 and also the BMW approach coming into the final turn 1 into slip past. Gibbs, however, managed to immediately claim a place back, sending this fantastic move around the outside of E-Classens in turn 2 and slotting himself back up into P11. A couple of laps later, Papin was chasing after Perry Gronstra and Sula coming over the skyline when Perry Gronstra lost the rear end of the car, slamming into the wall and getting himself a slowdown penalty. He managed to allow Papin to slip through cleanly, however he made contact with Jellyfish as he was trying to slide through as well, sending both of them into the wall before letting Jellyfish go. The battle for the final points positions of 15th and 16th was pretty close between Tipple, Silver Arrow and Hideaki before Tipple and Silver Arrow did a little bit of synchronised sliding into the outside wall of the cutting. This allowed Hideaki to slip past, and then later on in the lap coming down the Conrad Straight, Hideaki was able to pick up the slipstream off of Tipple and slip himself past coming into the chase. Perry Gronstra was having a race to forget as he dropped down into 22nd position after a second pit stop before eventually managing to recover up into 13th position. The biggest shock though must have come for Kaki. He was leading the race with 3 laps to go when all of a sudden his car seemed to stop in the middle of the road before disconnecting. This then put his teammate Dinders up into the lead, gifting him his first race win in the AOR League, with Tony R coming up in 2nd place and then Wycombs taking that final podium spot in 3rd position. Round 10 took us to Monza for our first night race of the season, and Papand also got his first pole position of the season, looking for a decent result. Kaki got a pretty poor start, was immediately jumped by Kanuma and was also being pressurised by Perry Gronstra on the run down to the first chicane. He tried desperately to hold on to the position, squeezing Perry Gronstra coming through the first turn, but there was a little bit of contact between the two, which bumped Kaki down behind, and the rest of the field bunched up behind them. Into the next chicane though, Perry Gronstra, who slipped himself up into 3rd position, ran a little bit deep and had to jump across the chicane. That gave him a cut track penalty and dropped him in behind Kaki, allowing him to retake 3rd place, as Gronstra tried to rejoin the circuit, dropping down into 9th place before staying out of trouble coming into the first of the 2 Lesmos. At the end of the first lap, Centro and his Mercedes AMG had a little bit of a train of cars behind him. They were all bunching up as Perry Gronstra was the first to try and make the move down the inside into turn 1, climbing up over the curb and then squeezing Centro through the second, able to get the traction coming out of turn 2 and slotting himself up into 7th position. Sula was once again trying to look for a decent result as he was pressurising Tony R for 4th position coming down towards turn 1. He managed to get to the inside, however coming into the first turn, climbed up over the curb, took a little bit too much and got himself a cut track penalty, slowing him down, costing him a bunch of places as Jellyfish first slipped past, then Perry Gronstra and also 1 or 2 other drivers behind him. Back at the front of the field, Papin was still holding on to the lead as Kanuma was trying to pressurise him around the outside coming into turn 1. Papin held his nerve though and then went side by side through the first chicane, and Kanuma wasn't quite able to make the move stick, but this brought Kaki right up onto the back of the leading pair. Coming into the next chicane, Kanuma was still eager to try and get past, trying to make the move down the inside of Papand, but once again Papand put off a fantastic defence and managed to keep hold of the lead, whereas Kaki was trying to capitalise on Kanuma losing a little bit of momentum, trying to go around the outside into the first Lesmos, but wasn't quite able to make the move stick. On the following lap it was once again Kanuma trying to get past Papand, this time down the inside coming into the chicane. However, he braked a little bit earlier than Papand did, as Papin was much braver on the brakes. Kaki also tried to get in on the action as well, pulling up alongside Kanuma, but wasn't quite able to get the drive coming out of turn 2. Coming into the next chicane, the top 3 were running in the line, no moves made there. However, Kanuma had a pretty poor exit, which allowed Kaki to pull up alongside and get the inside line for the first of the 2 Lesmos. Kaki tried to make the move stick. There was a little bit of contact between the 2 mid-corner, which pushed Kanuma out wide and dropping him down into 3rd place, promoting Kaki up into 2nd. A little bit further back was Blue Rat trying to hold on to possibly his best result of the season, trying to defend 7th place to Sula behind in the Bentley. A little bit of contact there in the second chicane, shoving Sula out wide, but Blue Rat was able to hold on to 7th as Sula lost a little bit of momentum and dropped down 2 positions. In the latter stages of the race, both Papan and Kaki had managed to extend the gap to Kanuma in 3rd. Kaki was trying to make a move around the outside of Papan coming into the Parabolica, but wasn't quite able to make the move stick there in that moment. A lap later, and Kaki was trying to make another move around the outside of Papan, this time down into the first chicane. Papan once again putting up a fantastic defence to hold on to the lead and keep Kaki behind him. Kaki was obviously desperate to try and apply as much pressure as possible to Papan before the pressure backfired on him, and he made a mistake coming into the second chicane, which sent him deep, almost making contact with the back of Papan. However, the only damage done was Kaki losing a lot of ground. Kaki made one final push trying to close out to the back of Papan, but he ran out of time, and ultimately, with Papan's fantastic defensive drive, he held on to the win with Kaki in 2nd and Kanuma coming home in 3rd. The penultimate round was at Hockenheim, where if Kaki came away with the win, he would also take away the Drivers' Championship. He started on pole position and had a pretty good strong start off the line, and Perry Gronstra was also able to get a good start, slipping up the inside of Papan through turn 1 to take 2nd place. The other drivers behind him were mostly able to filter through, a couple of them running wide as Gibbs was driving through the pit lane. Approaching the hairpin for the first time was a massive swarm of cars. One of the McLarens there in the background of the picture smashing through a polyester sign before approaching the actual hairpin, where there's a little bit of contact between a number of drivers, a little bit of bumping and shoving, but all drivers coming away mostly unscathed and without damage. On the 3rd lap, Perry Gronstra was trying to find a way past Kaki coming into the hairpin, sending a move down the inside but outbraking himself slightly, using the runoff area on the exit, allowing Kaki to slip back through underneath and retake 1st position. 2 laps later, and Perry Gronstra was again trying to move up into the lead, Papan much closer this time, and also outbraking himself, giving Gronstra a little tap from behind, but the 3 drivers continued on in the positions as they were. Further back, and Maisie was trying to pressurise Rhaegar for 10th position and was trying to move up the inside coming into the stadium section. He managed to make that move stick coming into the hairpin, moving across. Rhaegar doing a good job to recognise that and getting on the brakes early enough to avoid making contact. 2 drivers who couldn't avoid making contact though were Perry Gronstra and Kaki. Gronstra outbraking himself coming into turn 8 and making contact with the side of Kaki's McLaren before allowing him to rejoin back in 1st position. At the halfway stage in the race, both Papan and Perry Gronstra decided to make a pit stop, Kaki continuing on trying to zero stopper in this race. As the sun was starting to set and the temperatures cooling, the battle for 7th position was heating up. Kanuma was trying to make the move down the inside of Jellyfish coming into the hairpin and was able to make that move cleanly, slotting himself up into 7th and pushing Jellyfish down into 8th. Just a couple of corners later, E. Clarsons was then applying the pressure to Jellyfish, wanting to follow Kanuma through, and made a move down the inside coming into the stadium section, pulling off another clean overtake and dropping Jellyfish down into 9th. After having made his pit stop earlier in the race, Perry Gronstra was trying to make the move down the inside of Tony R, who was on worn tyres. There was just a minor bit of contact coming into the hairpin, but that pushed Tony R back down into 3rd and Gronstra slotting up into 2nd. A lap later, and Papan was also on the fresher tyres trying to find a way past Tony R. Tony having a slight moment through turn 8, which allowed Papan to perform a switchback on Tony through turn 9 and get a decent run heading down towards the stadium section. Tony, however, had other plans and was able to hold on to 3rd place coming into the right-hander and keep Papan behind him for almost another lap. It wasn't until the hairpin where Papan tried to make a move around the outside, coming in through the braking zone. He ran a little bit deep, however he was able to get the drive coming out the exit of the corner, being on the fresher tyres with more grip, and was able to slot himself up into 3rd position ahead of Tony. Next up to try and make a move past Tony was Kanuma, who wasn't able to find a way past through turn 8 or 9, but was able to set himself up quite nicely, ready for the right-hander leading into the stadium section. With Kanuma on the fresher tyres, he got that better drive coming out of turn 9 and pulled up alongside Tony R for the inside line. Tony did give Kanuma a little bit of a squeeze coming into the entry of the corner, however Kanuma held his nerve and managed to slot himself up into 4th, pushing Tony down into 5th. Back at the front though, in 1st position was Kaki, driving a fantastic zero-stop strategy around Hockenheim and crossing the line to not only claim victory at Hockenheim, but also become the champion of Season 5 PC GT3 Elite League at Apex Online Racing. Papan came home in third with Perry Gronstra in second. And then it was the final round of the season at Sonoma. Perry Gronstra taking pole ahead of Papan and Klawitsky, but ultimately all eyes were on Konuma, who was starting in 10th position and needed to get up into third if Perry Gronstra was to win in order for Konuma to take second in the Drivers' Championship. All drivers got off to a pretty clean start and Konuma started to make his charge. Next up in line was Sula in 8th position, and he almost made a move stick coming through the hairpin at the top end of the circuit, but Sula managed to get the drive out and just about managed to hold on to the position. That was until Sula made a slight mistake coming out of turn 8A and picked up a slowdown penalty. That allowed Konuma, along with a number of other drivers, to slip past, and Sula dropping down a number of places before making contact with the Z4, pushing them both out wide and losing out on a couple more positions. Coming back to Konuma, he was pressurising Jellyfish for P7. Jellyfish making a slight mistake coming through turn 6, running out a little bit wide, allowing Konuma to slot up along the inside. Konuma was then able to get a good exit and use the power of the Aston Martin to pull ahead of Jellyfish, moving over to the inside, coming into the braking zone of the hairpin to secure P7. Later on in the race, after a number of drivers had made their pit stop, Konuma was trying a zero-stop strategy along with Mini Black. Konuma was trying to slot himself up into that all-important third position that he needed to get, but Mini Black was holding a defensive line coming into turn 1 and was able to hold on to the position for now. A bit further back, one of the drivers who had made that pit stop was Klawitsky. He unfortunately disconnected from the session and ended up going straight on into the barrier and then across the other side of the circuit before eventually parking the car. This of course made the chances for Konuma ever more hopeful, as that was one less driver that he needed to worry about in the battle for second in the Drivers' Championship. With 6 laps remaining, Konuma was getting close to Mini Black on a number of occasions, almost making a couple of passes stick, but Mini Black was putting up an almighty defence, still holding on to that final podium spot. With 2 laps to go though, Konuma had dropped back from Mini Black and was now coming under pressure from Jellyfish, as Konuma was starting to struggle with the tyres. Coming through the very fast turn 10, Konuma lost the rear end of the car and smashed into the wall, causing pretty heavy damage to the rear of his Aston Martin. He then retried joining back onto the circuit, but was then hit from behind by Hideaki, who was completely unsighted to the rejoining Konuma, flipping him over and causing massive damage to both cars. This of course completely put Konuma out of the running for second position in the Drivers' Championship, as he was to come home in 11th position. Perry Gronstra was to come home with the win, with Papan in second, Jellyfish and Mini Black swapping places in the final lap, as Mini Black was pushed off track by Sula as he was trying to unlap himself, and of course with Konuma's troubles that meant that Perry Gronstra came away with second place in the Drivers' Championship. So that is the roundup with all the highlights from the 12 race season. If you want to see the full races, links can be found in the description down below to Fizzy's channel, where he has the entire broadcast from every single race in full, and you'll be able to watch those there. Season 6 is coming up. You can find links in the description once again to the details for signing up to the Apex Online Racing League for Season 6 if you're interested. But thank you very much for watching this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll see you racing online on Project Cars.